Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In the previous episode, we started making progress on the Mark II. So my buddy Sean and I pulled the old engine out of it and I revealed the new 5M that will be going into it in the near future. So we're not necessarily at a standstill, but I'm not going to do anything else on that car right now as I'm waiting for another engine stand to come in. I'm pretty particular about the engine stands that I like to use, especially for long, heavy inline sixes. This one right here is my preference. This one's just a Harbor Freight, it's a Harbor Freight engine stand rather. And this is what they rate as a 2,000 pound engine stand. And these ones just end up being a little bit sturdier than your normal engine stand, or especially something like this old 3-leg engine stand right here. That is, the tricycle design seems pretty apt to tip over in my opinion, and by the time that you actually put weight on an engine stand like this, or even a similar design with 2 front legs, those of you that have done it know, you always feel like that vertical beam is going to break or fold over, whereas this style engine stand is a little bit heavier duty, a little bit stronger, and it has swivel casters the whole way around, so you can move the engine wherever you need to in space, which is pretty nice. So I went ahead and I ordered another one of those. Harbor Freight, I believe, discontinued their version of it, but I have an Amazon equivalent that's on its way right now. But with all that being said, that is not what this video is about. What it is about is what's over on my white table here. And we have over here the solution to lag on the Mark IV Supra. So, quick overview, it's a 6-cylinder direct port rail-based nitrous system. I also bought one of their vertical nitrous bottle mounting brackets, and we got one of their 10-pound bottles with this as well. So this should be a pretty all-encompassing, all-inclusive kit for just about everything that I need to put nitrous on the Mark IV Supra. So we're not going to get a whole lot done on it today, but what I would like to do is to take this right here, which is their X Series purge kit, and I can position this in the car as I already know where it's going to be located, and then tomorrow I'll have the materials to mount the bottle bracket. We can get that placed, we can get the bottle placed in the car, run the line to it, so on and so forth, and then the last order of business will be getting the rail itself machined, as I believe these come without any machining done to them as far as the location of each of the outlets from the rail. So that'll need to be done. Like I said, we're not going to do that today. We'll do that some other time, as I don't have any machining tools here, and that is a job that needs to be done on a mill as opposed to my drill press over there. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start figuring out where this purge solenoid is going to be mounted, how it's going to be mounted, get it wired in, so on and so forth, and we'll get that knocked out. So before we can mount anything in the car, we need to get the actual nitrous solenoid and the purge solenoid assembled. So this smaller solenoid is the purge solenoid, and this larger solenoid is the actual nitrous solenoid. And I'm lucky enough where this nitrous solenoid has a purge port on it that you can see right there. So what I'm going to do is to couple these two solenoids together, kind of like so. They'll be linked with this simple 8th NPT union fitting, and that will help to make everything a more consolidated package, and I don't have to worry about remote mounting or making the mounting any more difficult than it needs to be for this. So all I'm going to do is take some Teflon tape, being careful not to get any of the tape in the orifice of this union fitting. I'll thread it into one of the solenoids, thread the other solenoid onto that assembly, and at that point we'll be ready to start making a mounting bracket and get these two solenoids located in the car. All right, so we have our little nitrous assembly done here, and just my OCD in action. I had to make sure that they sat level, or set pretty much perfectly parallel to one another. I just did that by looking across the bottom side of the purge solenoid to the actual nitrous solenoid. It's good enough, and we're ready to proceed with figuring out a mounting bracket for these. So the little purge solenoid uses its 832 thread, whereas the nitrous solenoid itself uses a 1032 thread. So they're a little bit different as far as the thread pitches involved with actually mounting these, however you choose to do so. But what I'm going to do now is get a piece of paper, and since the mounting holes don't sit really along the center line of the two solenoids, like so, the easiest way to determine where they're actually going to mount and be located is to take some paper and make a little template, so that way I'm not guessing as far as where I'm drilling when I'm actually making the mounting bracket. It makes things a little bit easier that way. With a little bit of work, the solenoid bracket is now completed and installed into the Supra. So I didn't film a whole lot of this process, so hopefully you guys can put the pieces together from what I did not film, but I have a simple little aluminum bracket that houses both the nitrous solenoid and the purge solenoid, and I wanted to put it in this location as, frankly, going around and looking at different spots in the cowl, there was no better place to get it to fit than right here. So this leaves me a good track inward with the nitrous line coming to the actual nitrous solenoid. It leaves me a good path outward from the outlet of the solenoid right here where my middle finger is, and that will have a line that runs from there over to the nitrous rail that will be housed somewhere around or on the intake manifold. And it gives me a good position for the purge, where I have somewhere around here, right here, this 3/16 stainless line. I'll be able to bend that to whatever contour it needs to be bent to run the purge line up and out of the cowl area, and that will give me the ability to see the purge when it's happening and make sure that I am getting nitrous in the line as opposed to air or anything else. So that's kind of the thought process behind why the bracket is the way that it is, why it's located where it's located. And I checked multiple times. It does clear the actual cowl panel, and this was the best spot that I could choose for it. So now we're at the point where I can paint that bracket. I can run the line to it once I get the bottle bracket mounted, get the bottle in the car, and then it will be time to get the actual rail machined. So we're not going to do any of that right now. It's late. I need to get out of here. And I guess tomorrow we'll come in, play around with this a little bit more, as I should have my piece of steel to make the actual bottle bracket mount. We can do that, and at that point we'll be a machined nitrous rail and some lines away from having a nitrous system on this car. So with all that being said, I'm going to get out of here. I will see you guys tomorrow, and we will keep going with this nitrous install. It's a new day and time to continue working on the Supra's nitrous system install. So my piece of steel came in, and this is what the bottle bracket will mount to. And this will weld to the cage, the bottle bracket will bolt to this, and everything will work harmoniously together. So what I'm going to do is put the bracket on here, something like that. You can see I got just the right length that the bolt holes, they are captured on the piece of steel, but the piece of steel doesn't extend much farther than the overall length between, or overall distance between the two pieces of the bracket. So what I need to do is determine where these bolt holes need to be in terms of location on the piece of steel, and from there I can figure out where my holes will be marked, drill those, get all of that squared away, and then I can start working on the actual form of this plate. As you guys know me and know that I'm not going to just weld a big steel rectangle to the cage. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get to it and see what we can come up with in terms of a neat design for this bracket. There we have our finished bottle mount bracket. So I'm curious if any of you guys saw on the community section of the YouTube page, I put up a post of this thing roughed in and asked if anybody was able to guess what the part is. So if you were able to guess it, let me know in the comments below. If not, now you know what the purpose of that weird looking piece of steel is. So now I'm at the point where I can go ahead and weld the nuts on the backside of the plate. So what I'm going to do is take 4 M8 125 nuts, put them on the backside of the plate, weld them with some silicone bronze, and this will make it so when the actual bottle bracket is being mounted to this plate, I can just thread bolts in from the front side or from the bracket side of it, and it will make it that much easier to contend with when everything's in the car, not having to actually nut and bolt something in, but rather just bolt it in. So let me go ahead, get set up, and get all of these nuts positioned in a place where they're actually ready to be welded in. We'll do that, and then we'll be about at the point where we can weld this bracket, or this mounting plate rather, to the cage. little bit of welding, or I guess brazing later, and we have the 4 nuts welded on the back side of the plate and tested, make sure the threads still work, and they do, so that's a good thing. And now we are ready to take this mounting plate and go over and actually get it located and welded on the roll cage in the Supra. We're in tight confines here in the car, but I have the mounting plate at least tacked onto the main hoop of the roll cage and ready to be welded. So here is what we have currently. So this sits right behind the passenger, and I wanted to put it on this side of the car, on the passenger side, as for the vast majority of the operation, or the vast majority of the time that I'm operating this car, it'll be just me in it. So especially going down the drag strip, I wanted to offset a little bit of weight over to the passenger side to try to counteract me sitting in the driver's seat. So beyond that, we have 2 welds that will go on here. We have 1 weld that'll be on the top side, and then 1 weld on the bottom side down here. And I wanted to take a moment to talk about hand placement as you're welding something like this. Now, we're very limited as far as where I can get my hand, where I can position it to accomplish these welds. But we need to be very careful, or I need to be very careful about where I actually do put my hand so I don't cook it in the middle of welding. Now, if I can find the photo, I'll put a quick snapshot up now of one time that I did not do this. And this was when I was at school at UNO. I was welding 4-link brackets in the back of the project car Maverick that we were working on for one of my instructors, and I chose poorly as far as where I placed my hand. So it was a bracket similar to this, and I braced my hand something like this and was running the weld vertically, something along those lines. And you can see that the side of my hand, kind of right near where my pinky is there, is in pretty close proximity to the weld that I'll be doing here. Now, the same thing happened at UNO, and I absolutely cooked the side of my hand. Now, I want to try to avoid doing that now, as it was pretty funny to see the little face that I drew on the blisters in that photo, but I think I could go without having blisters attached to my hand right now. So I need to be cognizant of where I put my torch hand and try not to cook it, try to keep all my skin and everything the way that it is right now. So with all that being said, let me go ahead, I'll pull the actual mounting bracket off of here, and I can get to running these 2 welds and then figure out if it needs to be gusseted, and then the structure of those gussets, and then before too long we'll be ready for paint and this project will be completed. After working on my contortionist skills, or practicing them I should say, the bottle mount, or the bottle mount plate rather, is welded in place. So it's cool at this point, and welds came out all right. You can't ask for a whole lot when you're in the odd positions that you guys saw me in, but now we are ready to put some paint on this. So once it's painted, that'll be the last thing prior to the mount being, or the actual bracket being able to be finally bolted to the mount, and all will be well there. So with the gussets, this thing is rock solid, and I don't have to worry about the bottle moving around in any way that I don't want it to, as the bottle itself is heavy enough, let alone when you put 10 pounds of nitrous on top of it, things can get out of hand very quickly. But I'm going to go ahead and go get some primer and go get the actual paint that I'm going to use. We can get some paint put down on this, and before too long we'll be able to mount everything up and see what the finished product looks like. While I'm waiting for the paint for the bottle mount plate to dry, why don't we go ahead and wire in the nitrous solenoid and the purge solenoid. So like I showed earlier, those two solenoids are housed up here in the cowl, and I have this 2-pin connector that is the actual nitrous connector, and then this one over here is the purge connector. So obviously this one will need to be shortened up quite a bit, but this actual nitrous connector right here should be a reasonable length. So I have both of the solenoids in the bracket over here, and what I'm going to do is preliminarily, here's a tongue twister for you, but I'm going to twist these wires. So I'll have the two purge solenoid wires twisted coming off the solenoid, and the two actual nitrous solenoid wires twisted coming off of that solenoid. And at that point I can determine the lengths that need to be cut to, trim those down, get them ready to be part of a connector. And what I'm actually going to do is, these will be on a Deutsch connector as is tradition, but rather than run everything or run it onto two separate 2-pin connectors, if I have enough materials here, which I may or may not. There, I have an extra 4-pin connector right here. So rather than run two 2-pin connectors, I'll go ahead and put these all on one 4-pin connector, and everything will be a little bit more consolidated and make me a little bit happier that way. After some nice easy wiring, both of the solenoids are wired in. So tied everything into a 4-pin Deutsch. The side with the X's that you guys see right there is the nitrous solenoid, and the opposing side is obviously the purge solenoid. So let me clean these tools up and then power the car up, press the purge solenoid, and let's see if it actually clicks. All right, let's see if this solenoid clicks. So we have power, we have main power, and now listen to that. Left the engine fan switch on. So should be good to go. The paint on the bottle bracket mount is still a little bit tacky, so let's take a few minutes and make the actual purge outlet line. So this is 1 foot of 3/16 stainless tubing, and then we also have two, whoops, whew, thankfully that didn't go into the ethers, but You guys may recognize this, and when we did the brake lines on this, it's just a simple compression fitting. So we have the compression sleeve, or the olive, and we have the line nut, and these will just get smashed down in this fitting that's on the outlet side of the purge solenoid, and that will give air and excess nitrous a path to exit the car, and will provide a pretty cool white plume, provide a pretty good show when everything starts coming out of it. So let me figure out the angle that this tube needs to be bent to and kind of the routing that it needs to take. We'll get it bent up and get it fitted into the cowl area here. There we have it. So I tried to center the purge outlet in this factory wiper hole in the cowl as I can get a piece of plastic, drill the center hole, and either epoxy or plastic weld it into the cowl right here, sealing up pretty much everything else around just the little purge nozzle coming out. What it looks like on the inside is pretty simple, just a little 90 with some swoops and bends and everything, and I'm pretty happy with how that looks. And it's going to look pretty wild with a giant plume of nitrous coming up out of it whenever I get the bottle filled and get the rest of the system squared away. Well, I think the paint on the mounting plate for the nitrous bottle bracket is dry, or at least dry enough, and I cannot wait to see what this all looks like assembled, so let's go ahead and knock that out. Well, if I do say so myself, this looks pretty awesome. So I'm very happy with how this came out. Puts the bottle in a really nice place, easy to access to open, easy to access to get both of the knobs to actually fasten it down in place. It's plenty rigid, and it keeps it out of the way for the passenger seat that will eventually reside in this area. And more than likely, even with the passenger seat in, you can still get the nitrous bottle in and out very easily. So it keeps it nice and tucked out of the way. Like I was saying earlier, it offsets a little bit of weight over to the passenger side to compensate for me when I'm in the driver's seat making a hit with this thing. And I can look over my right shoulder and just see a 10-pound bottle of giggle gas sitting there, ready to make this thing come alive. So one unfortunate thing is the time that I spent on the nitrous purge outlet line was all for nothing, as it sits tucked up underneath of the hood. Let's see if I can show you guys. But if you can see in there, sits up underneath of the hood, and I don't want to be purging nitrous into the engine bay, as that's just a recipe for disaster. So I still have a bit of line, or I'll more than likely order a new crush sleeve and new section of straight line from nitrous outlet, so I can remake that and put it in a more advantageous location, somewhere up in here, or maybe over in here, what have you. Just something to get it out of the engine bay there, just so I don't end up oxidizing a fire if there ever is one. But with all of that being said, that's going to be about the end of this episode. So we made some pretty good progress, did some out of position welding, got the nitrous bottle located, its bracket located and everything else in a really awesome spot. Everything worked out exactly the way that I wanted it to, and I couldn't be happier with it. But before I drone on incessantly, let's go ahead and wrap this one up. So thank you guys, as always, for tuning in, for checking out the things that I have going on here, for coming along for this wild ride with me, for starting that wild ride with me, And we did have the new engine stand came in earlier today, so I can get that assembled, get the old engine on it, and start swapping parts from engine to engine to get the 5M for the Mark II Supra squared away, to get that car back up and running and be able to use it when when springtime comes along and the weather breaks and car season begins here. But with all that being said, that'll be about the end of this episode. So, as always, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, and I will see you guys in the next episode.